Welcome back to the Mike's Madness YouTube channel. We're getting back to the simulation conference tournaments, and this is the last video of which we will be doing so before we get into the simulation selection Sunday, quote unquote, and all that good stuff. So we start off again on the same slide that we did on the previous two, just a little recap. And again, these are the ones that were finished in reality before the NCAA canceled everything. So, you can pause the video, take a look at that before, before we get started and everything with that. These are the ones from 2 videos ago. The first one that we did, you had Vermont, Southern Utah, Cal State, Northridge, Princeton, Rider, and Morgan State. Those were all simulations. Those were not ones that were in reality. Now we take a look at the other ones from last time. Yeah, these were the new ones, the ones from yesterday's video. We had Duquesne, Ball State, Nichols State, Texas State, Southern, and Grand Canyon. Now, I just realized I misspelled Nichols State. There's supposed to be an S before, or an S at the end of nickel. But you get it, same difference. And taking a look at Duquesne winning the Atlantic 10, that could possibly be a bid stealer, as they would call it. Whereas, you had Xavier in the field of 68, and what was another team? I guess Indiana as well. So with Duquesne, a team that was not projected in, not projected in, and winning their conference tournament and getting the automatic bid could be a possible bid stealer, and therefore knocking out Xavier or Indiana. Now again, today is going to be a big day because these are the final conferences. You get the American Athletic, the Big East, the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the SEC. Now taking a look for some teams that are kind of on the bubble, I guess you could say, and looking to get in. You got teams like UCLA, who right now is I believe the last 4 in. Well, actually, let's take a look at the projections here. Yeah, I mean, look, right now, Arizona State right there playing Michigan right now. They're in. A loss early in the conference tournament could, in fact, knock them out or knock them down to the first 4. Indiana right now, look, they're in, but depending on what they do and depending on what other teams do today, in these simulations could knock them out. You never know. Like, for instance, if some team that, again, a bid stealer like Duquesne in some of these other conferences, if they go on to win, then it could knock them out, knock the bubble teams out. And looking at the East, look, UCLA and Texas Tech, right now, those are 2 teams that are in the field of 68, but they're playing the first 4 game. So, if UCLA or Texas Tech could win their conference tournament, that could possibly boost them up to to one of those last 4 byes, which means they won't have to play in the first 4. Taking a look at the South bracket, not much there in terms of bubble teams. But taking a look here at the West, yeah, you got Duquesne and Xavier right now. Where, look, right now, taking a look at all that, some other teams that, instead of Duquesne, could possibly be in that spot are probably teams of the likes of, just trying to think, maybe Memphis or Stanford, or, again, I'm not really sure. Let's see, trying to think of what other teams. Oh, NC State. Yeah, there you go. NC State possibly. Is a bubble team, so we'll see how they do in the ACC tournament and whether or not that'll boost them into the field of 68. Now, the American Athletic tournament had been canceled before it even got started. So Cincinnati was the 1 seed, Wichita State the 4 seed, Tulsa was the 3, and Houston is the 2. Teams that are on the bubble on this one, Wichita State, if they lose early, they could be knocked down to a bubble first 4 game. Cincinnati, they need to you know, I think honestly, I think Cincinnati is in. I think they're solidly in. Um, Tulsa, if they can win it, they might be able to. You know, well, if they win the conference tournament, then obviously they get the automatic bid. But if they get to if they get to the championship game, then maybe they could get into in the last four in slot. Same goes for Memphis. If they can get to the final game, then they might have a chance of getting in the last four in. But if they win it, then you're in because you got to get the automatic bid. Taking a look at the completed simulation, it was Wichita State that had come out on top, and I was just talking about Memphis. Well, they lost in the first round to East Carolina. Talk about Tulsa. Well, they lost to East Carolina. And we almost had an issue here where East Carolina looked like they almost won the whole thing, but not to be, as the Wichita State Shockers went on and won the whole thing. Now, the issue here is with Cincinnati losing to South Florida in the first round, only by 2 points. You got to wonder, does that knock them down to one of the last four in spots, or are they still solidly in? Not sure how it'll play out. But then you take a look, Wichita State only beat South Florida by 1 point. So interesting stuff there. And again, as I said in some of the other videos, you never know really where this stuff will go. And because that's how it is with some of these schools. Some of the schools, and I know in yesterday's video, I said, for these smaller conferences, the March Madness starts in the conference tournament, because if you lose that game, you're done. But it's, the same principle applies for some of these teams, like in the American Athletic Tournament, like South Florida or East Carolina. Those teams don't really have any shot of getting in unless they win the whole thing. So, I realize that computer simulation may not be accurate, and it most likely is not. But, at the same time, you never know. Things could have played out so many different ways. With that being said, we take a look at the Big East tournament, and we had 2 games that were played before everything was canceled. And, even in the Big East, I think was the last conference to cancel anything. So, if I remember correctly, they canceled the Big East tournament at the halftime of the St. John's Creighton game. They had actually started that game and then canceled it at halftime, which was kind of odd. And I think that was last Thursday. I think that was when that was all happening. So I think so, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. It was either last Wednesday or last Thursday that they had, the Big East canceled everything. I know they were the last conference too, because I remember that it was halftime of the Creighton St. John's game that they had gone on and canceled the Big East tournament. And then it was later that day that the NCAA had canceled, ended up canceling the March Madness Field of 68 tournament. But taking a look here, Xavier, we go back a couple slides, and they were one of the last 4 in. Well, a loss to DePaul now really hurts their chances there. They lost. And that was a real deal game. That was real. That was not a simulation. So you have to take a look at that and say, Xavier probably won't get in because they're, a loss to the worst team in the conference, and they were on the bubble. In order for them to legitimately be in, I think you would have had to see them get past Villanova. And, I think even if they had beaten DePaul and lost to Villanova, I think you may still have seen them in the in the field of 68. But I think that definitely, it's not likely you'll see Xavier on the in the Sunday video being in the tournament, rather. Sorry. So yeah, the Big East tournament here, taking a look at the completed simulation. And, look at DePaul. Look where DePaul got. And you got to think to yourself, what if Xavier had beaten DePaul? Could they have gotten all the way to the championship game? And if so, what would have you know, what seeding would they be in? You know, I think if you get to the championship game like that, beating Villanova, you know, beating Marquette, I understand Marquette may not be the best team, but they're a tournament team, and they have Marcus Howard, who is a scoring machine. If you can get past Villanova and Marquette, excuse me, you got to have a legitimate chance of being in the field of 68 and not having to play a first four game in Dayton. So, I mean, look, DePaul almost went on and won the whole thing, but they did lose by 4 points to Butler, so that would have been a real issue. You probably would have seen them steal a bid from a team like Texas Tech, or I'm trying to think of what other teams were kind of in there. I mean, Arizona State probably. Yeah, probably Arizona State most likely, or UCLA, depending on what happens in the Pac-12 tournament later. But, you know, look, Butler went on to win the whole thing, and they only beat Providence by 2 in overtime. I mean, and then, you know, you had a 4-point game between Seton Hall and Marquette. You had a 4-point game between Marquette and DePaul. I almost said DePaul. You know, so a lot of close games here, and in the end, Butler was the simulated champion. So taking a look at the ACC tournament, and there was actually quite a few games that had gone on beforehand. I think, yeah, Notre Dame, Boston College, I believe, was the last game of the tournament before everything got canceled the next day. So we had Florida State and Clemson, Duke and NC State, Louisville and Syracuse, and Virginia and Notre Dame. Now for NC State, you know, they really need to make the case to beat Duke. I think if they beat Duke, excuse me, my goodness, had they beaten Duke in this simulation, I mean, if they do, rather, then I think you might see them kind of get in over a team again like Arizona State or Texas Tech, depending on what those teams do in their conference tournament, or UCLA again. Louisville, if they can win the tournament, maybe you see them go up to a 2 seed. And, you know, Virginia, just hoping to not fall out of a 6 seed. You know, you don't want to see them fall down to a 7 or 8 seed. So they definitely need to. I mean, they have some improving to do. It's not like they have to win any games to stay in the field, though. And Florida State, you know, with Dayton not winning their conference tournament, you have to wonder if Florida State wins this whole thing, do they now get the 1 seed over Dayton? You could make an argument. You really could. But we take a look at the completed simulation, and it was Duke that ended up winning the whole thing by 4 points over Louisville. And taking a look at some of the bracket scores here, Virginia only beat Notre Dame by 1 point. That was a close one. Duke beat NC State convincingly. Florida State only beat Clemson by 4. But yeah, Duke won their 2 games convincingly and then went on and beat Louisville by 4. So yeah, close game there. Duke wins the ACC. And now the Big Ten tournament, which is an interesting deal here because you've got Wisconsin, Maryland, Michigan State, Illinois, Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers, and Michigan all are in. So about 9, so what, that 9 teams, yeah? Yeah, 9 teams. 2 teams that have some work to do, I would say, are Minnesota and Indiana. Indiana, I think, needs to, I mean, here's the thing. If Minnesota doesn't win the Big Ten tournament and Indiana can beat Penn State and keep it close with Maryland, I think you might see them stay in. However, if Minnesota wins the whole thing and gets that automatic bid, I do think you see them steal the bid from Indiana. Other than that, I don't mean, again, unless a team like Purdue goes on and wins it. But other than that, every other team's in the field. So the only 2 teams Indiana really has to worry about here are Purdue and Minnesota. Because again, it is unless one of those two teams wins the whole thing, gets the automatic bid, there's no team that can steal the bid away from them. Because it's not just Indiana who is kind of in, but could easily be out. Because as I mentioned before, you got Arizona State, UCLA, and Texas Tech. Those three teams, along with Indiana, are probably, again, the last four in. Well, Xavier right now, but they're probably out after their loss to DePaul. But yeah, Indiana, Arizona State, Texas Tech, and UCLA. Depending on what those four teams do, any one of these teams, like Purdue or Minnesota or some of the other teams like DePaul in the previous one, they win the whole thing, they're stealing a bid. And you hear that, you may have heard that before when they were talking about bracketology and all that good stuff, bid stealers. That's what they mean. Teams that are kind of on the bubble or not in at all, that win their conference tournament and steal a bid from those bubble teams. So taking a look at the completed simulation, and it was the Minnesota Golden Gophers that had gone on and won. And, look, Indiana did exactly what they, exactly what I was saying. They beat Penn State. They kept it, they didn't keep it close with Maryland. They lost by 16, but they kept it, I think you would have liked it to keep it a little bit closer. They don't have to worry about Purdue because Ohio State beat them. And, look at Ohio State. They almost went on and won the championship. They only lost by 2 in the championship game against Minnesota. Wisconsin only beat Michigan by 3. Same with same with Minnesota over Illinois, only won by 3. So, Minnesota a couple times. Look, they only beat Iowa by 2. And if you're Indiana right now looking at this, trying to get in the field of 68 here, and you're taking a look at what Minnesota did, you're saying to Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, or Iowa, Illinois, and Ohio State, rather, you're saying you couldn't have just played a little better and beat them. Because again, look, if Minnesota had gone to the championship game and lost, I don't think it matters. I don't think they get in at all. I really don't. Because I think right now, going into today in the brackets projections, I really think Minnesota would probably have fallen into that next 4 out or next 8 out or something like that. I don't think they were in the first 4 out or anything like that. I think they were at least in the next 4 out. Which implies that they really had some work to do. And if they didn't win their conference tournament, they were effectively done. But they do win the Big Ten tournament in the simulation and most likely steal that bid from Indiana because it's the automatic bid. Taking a look at the Big 12 tournament, you take a look here, you see Kansas State still in it. And a big game there in the 4-5 matchup between Texas and Texas Tech. I think the winner of that gets in, okay? And I think if the winner of that game beats Kansas, then I think you have a convincing argument to be in the last 4 bye category, meaning you don't have to play the first 4 game in Dayton. You're in the field of 64. So taking a look here, again, the front runners for this were probably Kansas and Baylor. And there you go. Kansas beats Baylor by 2 points in the championship game. And Texas Tech beat Texas by 3 and lost to Kansas by 12. Oklahoma beat West Virginia. That may knock West Virginia down a seed line. And Baylor really played some good games there, as well as Kansas did. So, Kansas gets the automatic bid. They will most likely be the #1 overall seed in the tournament now because only them and Gonzaga won their conference tournaments as the only 1 seeds projected, the only projected 1 seeds. The Pac-12 tournament, this is a big one because you've got teams like Arizona State and UCLA who really need to win pretty much need to win the whole thing in order to be in. I think, I think that's fair. You look there, Stanford, they lost to California, and they're probably out of it. I don't think there's any way that they could get in. And they weren't projected in the last four in or anything like that. And look, Colorado, I think they'll still be in, but you gotta wonder, are they going to fall down to like, an 8 or a 9 seed, or where will they fall? And then look, Washington State and California are still in it. Could they possibly go on a Minnesota-like run and win the whole thing and steal another bid? Steal a bid from Texas Tech, perhaps, or from Arizona State or UCLA as well. But again, Arizona State and UCLA are two teams that need to play really well, because if they don't, they probably only one of those teams gets in, unless perhaps this happens. Which this is crazy. Oregon State got to the final game, the championship game, and only lost by 1 to UCLA. And Washington State beat Arizona State. This is a lot. And Oregon State beat Oregon, as my cat is scratching at the door now, which is great. Oregon State almost stole a bid. Washington State advanced and played UCLA, and you have to wonder, what does that do for Arizona State? Oh, and Lizzie, my cat is meowing at the door all of a sudden. This is great. But yeah, some questions here with UCLA winning it. You have to wonder, how far does Oregon fall? Where do they fall? Arizona State, are they still in the tournament? And what happens to USC? Or where would they fall? As they're most likely in, but where will they be seated? UCLA gets the championship. Are they now in the field of 64, or do they have to still play a first 4 game? You wonder. And again, Arizona State, are they going to be in? It'll be interesting, because I think you take a look at some of the other teams that may be able to get in over them. You have this group of teams here: Arizona State, Indiana, and Xavier. I guess you could probably group in NC State as well. Those 4 teams, which one is the stronger team? It's tough, really. I think Indiana, I've said this all season long. I don't think Indiana's that great. NC State, again, same as Indiana. I don't think they're that great. I think they're close. And then, what was the other team? Xavier. They've been kind of up and down. They're not really consistent. And Arizona State, I think, is one of the more consistent teams. So I think you may still see them in, but it'll be interesting for sure. Now we look at the SEC tournament, and I think there's only one team that could really be a legitimate bid stealer, and that's probably Mississippi State. If Mississippi State gets to the championship, then you may start to be able to formulate an argument for them being in. Other than that, I don't see any other team, except, well, I don't know, maybe Texas A&M, if they're figuring things out. And maybe even Tennessee as well, because Tennessee has been pretty decent this season. They've been up and down as well. So we take a look at the completed simulation, and it was Florida and LSU in the championship game after LSU had beaten Auburn by 1 point. And my cat is meowing. Tennessee beat Kentucky by 1 point. That was close. Think about how this whole thing would have shaped out if Kentucky would have played Florida there in the semifinal. would Kentucky have beaten Florida, or would have Florida still won? You know, would have been interesting to see. And I mean, look, Auburn and LSU, that could have gone either way as well. But you know, as I was talking about earlier, Mississippi State probably will not be in the conversation here. They might be in the next 4 out or anything like that, but I don't think you'll be able to make an argument for them being in. Now, take a recap of today's conference tournament winners and which teams get the automatic bid. We had Wichita State from the American Athletic Conference, Butler from the Big East, Duke from the ACC, Minnesota most likely stealing a bid from the Big Ten, Kansas, you know, probably the most predictable one of the day as they win the Big 12 for like the millionth time in a row. UCLA wins to cement their spot in the field of 68. And Florida from the SEC, which, you know, Florida was in beforehand, but this win today, the conference tournament win today, you could see them go up a seat or two, depending on you know, the other teams that were on their same seed line or the ones above and how they did. But again, in regards to Minnesota and UCLA, you have to think that, you know, we probably won't see Indiana or Xavier in right now. Because Minnesota, again, they were not going to get in before. But with this conference tournament championship rather, you know, they're in because that's them's is the rules, as some would say. You know, it's the way it is. So, you know, that was the last of the conference tournaments. We will get the selection Sunday simulation deal all taken care of, and that will be up on Sunday. And then we start the tournament game simulations next week. So with that being said, thank you for watching this video. Oh, also, the other day we had gotten an announcement that Millersville was going to online instruction for the rest of the semester. So that means that the Mike's Madness WIXQ show is effectively over on the air, which is unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. So we'll be rolling with the YouTube channel for a little while, and you know, until August, I guess, when we get back to some sense of normality, I would assume, unless this really wrecks the whole world and this coronavirus. But anyway, you know, another thing is just something to do for the time that we're all in the house. So, you know, with that all being said, if you enjoyed the video, a thumbs up and, you know, a like or whatever it's called would be great. Subscribe as well for more videos and notifications and all that. And any feedback, comments, thoughts, anything of the like, you can put that in the comment section. That's always welcome. And other than that, I will see you all in the next video. I'm out.